Hey, what's up, guys? Harry here, and today I want to talk to you about my first Juno ride in New York. So I'm sure that most of you guys are familiar with Juno by now. We've done a bunch of videos on the channel, we've got a bunch of articles on the blog, and I was recently in New York to do some work, and one of the things that I was most excited for was to talk to some Juno drivers. So I have to also give a quick shout out to fellow YouTube rideshare blogger Jermaine Ellis, because it looks like he was actually recently in New York too, and I saw he had a video on his first ride with Juno, and he does way better editing than me, so I'll leave a link to his video in the show notes, and you guys can just maybe replace his face with mine, and that'll sort of be like what my trip was like in New York, because we did a lot of the same stuff. So definitely want to give a quick shout out to him. He has really great I love the editing in his videos, and I think he's even still doing a new video, a new vlog every single day. So definitely check that out. But back to Juno. So while I was there, I actually ended up taking 5 or maybe 6, I think 6 Juno rides. And honestly, the experience itself of taking a Juno ride as a passenger was very similar to an Uber ride, except a lot cheaper. So Juno is offering for new passengers right now 35% discounts compared to Uber prices for your first 30 days, and then they sort of slowly wean you off, and 10% less until I think you eventually pay about the same. But as for the rides themselves, I kept noticing one thing. It was literally the same cars, literally the same drivers, since all of these New York City drivers are doing Uber. They're all doing Juno. Some of them are doing Lyft. Some of them are doing Get, Via, right? There's 5 or 6 different options in New York, and a lot of the drivers, majority of the drivers I was coming across, are all doing multiple services. So it's kind of funny, because whether you're calling for a ride in a Get or a Lyft or an Uber or a Juno, you're getting the same drivers and the same types of cars. So that was just kind of an interesting observation. I didn't really notice a big difference in the level of service on my Juno rides, navigation, anything like that. I mean, it was a small sample size, granted, but a couple things did stand out to me on my Juno rides once I started talking to all the Juno drivers. I mean, really what ended up happening was they all were just talking shit on Uber. Some of the Juno drivers were definitely more talkative than others, but I sort of brought it up with them kind of slyly and said, I didn't just get in the car and say, hey, so how do you love Juno? What do you think about Uber, right? I kind of bring it up slowly and, make them comfortable, because I want to get their honest take, their honest opinion. And they all ended up telling me, every Juno driver I had, which probably makes sense, that's why they're driving for them, told me that they prefer Juno over Uber. They also, almost all of them, I think every single driver mentioned something about the commission, that they like that Juno takes a lot less, and they feel that Uber takes way too much. Uber, they were all saying, oh yeah, Uber takes 30, 40%, Juno takes way less, they treat drivers better, right? And it was kind of funny too, because I actually asked all the Juno drivers how much Uber takes from them, because all these Juno drivers are also doing Uber, and some of them are doing other services on top of that. And it's kind of funny, because you'll see like 3 or 4 tablets all in the car, because they all have to have their own tablet, just how it works in New York. And all these Juno drivers, though, that I asked about the Uber commission, it was funny because they all gave me a different answer. It was all in the 30 to 45% range. One driver would tell me, oh, Uber takes 42%, Uber takes 38%, another said 32%. And it was funny because they all knew that Uber took more, but they didn't know how much. So I think Juno has done a really good job kind of with that messaging to their drivers, like, oh, Uber takes a ton of money, we don't, right? The other thing that really stood out to me being in New York, taking these Juno rides, talking to locals, was that so many people had heard of Juno. Obviously, I kind of expected a lot of drivers to have heard about Juno, because especially in New York, there's kind of these big communities of drivers that all know each other, that all talk to each other. It's much more community-based than it is in other cities. And I was surprised, though, at just how many passengers had heard about Juno. I had a bunch of friends in New York and just kind of random people I was coming across, overhearing, and like Juno kept coming up. It was weird, right? I mean, the first night, one of my friends' friends was there, and she was telling me, oh, I'm an avid Uber user, but right now I'm only taking Juno, right? And this is just randomly, she's taking Juno every single day. And that kind of theme kept coming up. So I was really surprised at how many passengers were starting to adopt Juno. And it may be because it's cheaper right now, but also still at the same time, it's kind of, if I'm Uber, that's a little bit scary that some company can come in and undercut, and within a few months, within a year, everyone's talking about this company. Granted, Uber is still doing a lot more trips than Juno, but I was definitely surprised that people knew about it, people were taking it in a relatively short amount of time. I was just impressed and surprised at how much awareness there was of the company in New York. So Like I said, I was in New York. I was only there for a week, but I did get a good initial sense of the transportation scene. I also rode with Uber. I also rode with Get. I did a ton of walking. Also took the subway, which is obviously huge in New York. And so I sort of think that, kind of just from my first initial impression going there, really studying kind of the initial transportation scene, is that if Juno can keep drivers busy, I think there's no doubt these drivers are going to not only work for Juno, but prefer working for them over Uber. So I actually tried to meet with Juno while I was there, and I've been trying for a couple months, reaching out to them, talking to them, that we were going to have a meeting while I was there. Unfortunately, once I got there, they never got back to me. Would have been good to meet up, but maybe next time. So if you guys have ever taken a Juno ride, if you guys have any questions about the company, I'd be curious to hear your feedback. Feel free to leave a comment below, and if you guys enjoyed this video, feel free to give us a little thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. We release new videos every single week, and I'd love to hear from you. Take care. Talk soon.